Sicily, welcome to your first interview with Hype Plus. How are you doing?
I'm still here. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Man, where do we start? I think what I love to do is always take it back to the beginning of someone's life.
When I was born.
When you was born, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Pontiac, Michigan.
Okay.
And I was there for about 30 minutes.
Okay.
And then it was probably longer than that because they don't let you go from the doctor that fast. And then I moved to California.
Yeah. Why the move to California?
My parents had gotten divorced and my mother moved. It's a sad story. It's complicated.
Yeah.
I moved once my mom moved to California.
Yeah. You went with mom?
Yes.
Did she kind of know the temperature of what California was known for, or Los Angeles? It was just more so not about acting or any type of industry?
It was about safety. You know what I'm saying? A great escape. They did not have a good marriage.
Yeah.
It was more physical than I think one person would like. So she moved because my uncle had moved. And then she was like, okay, I need to get out of this marriage and find a safe place for my kids.
Yeah. How many siblings you had? You said kids.
I have 3 brothers.
Got you. And so around this time, you all moved together?
No, we didn't. So her and my older brother moved first. Mm-hmm. And then me and my brother that's 2 years younger than me moved a little bit after that. And she had my youngest brother in California.
Got you.
He got different daddy.
Okay. Going through that, was it a shock of things changing your environment, or was it easy for you to kind of adapt?
Yeah, I think it was easy. I mean, I think that the things that made it hard had nothing to do with moving to California, but it was more so an adjustment because of our family dynamic. Because it was an unhealthy, he used to, jam on the ones and twos on her. It was a very unhealthy environment. So I think that it was that, starting over and figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fairness, because mental health is really big right now. And then I think we as Black people in this country have experienced a lot of trauma. How do you think that affected you?
So it was really interesting because when I was a kid, I remember having these really weird nightmares. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that those things had actually happened. And it didn't really click for me until I became a parent. And then I got to see my mom in a very different lens. I think that sometimes we don't see that our parents are also people who are trying to work out things and trauma and do the best that they can.
Right.
So I think that once I had children, I realized that my mom never got the healing and the time that she deserved to be mentally okay to then be somebody's parent. That doesn't mean she was a bad parent. My mom was a great parent. We have the best memories, but I can see how you view the world, how you view people, how you view your relationships with people, how you view safety, whether or not you have access to safety. Those, in the ways that we don't talk about. Do people make me feel safe? Do I have peace? Those things. It was those things that I realized that she didn't get the opportunity for them to be familiar to her on a consistent basis. And I was it made me look at my relationship with her a bit differently.
Right.
I gave her a lot more grace in the areas where I was oh, you was just fucking stuff up. It was no, how do you're constantly learning on the go. And I think for people who have been in tumultuous situations, if you don't effectively heal, whatever that looks like for you, you're always holding that fear very close to you. That that feeling, you can make one misstep and that feeling that you're running from or trying to right the wrongs of will come back to you so quickly. And so I think that that's how she saw the world, and that's how she still here, sees people sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that I've given her a lot of understanding and room for that.
Yeah, as you became into your motherhood. I had to become older.
I had to live a little bit. I had to get some experience. Be in relationships with people and them do things to me and let me down. And I was like, oh, I get it. But also, like, understand that, you know, I would be like, oh, forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. It's okay to go through the grief. It's okay to hate somebody, to want to murder them, not logistically, but emotionally. You know what I'm saying? All of these things. And then to arrive at a place that's like, for me to be okay, I need to be actively working on dismantling my thoughts.
Gotcha.
And I had to meet myself in a lot of things. I remember, you know, I've always liked ladies my whole life. And I don't think that people knew that, like, out in the world. But, like, as I got older, I was like 19. But, like, I knew that I got married because it was the thing that I needed to do for my mom. Like, I needed her to see me in a healthy environment. I needed her to see me with someone and, like, having children and all of these things, because she had a bit of a health scare. And then there was this part of me that was like, well, if I get married and I do it this way, maybe I will circumvent ending up like my mom and having those lived experiences. Did it work out? I don't know. I don't think so. But, like, I think that sometimes we try so hard, not necessarily to live, but to distance ourselves from the pain, that we ended up becoming in a very tricky relationship with our pain. That, like, I used to say, like, when I got divorced, I had the wrong perspective of being strong. I was strong out of weakness, not out of strength. You know what I'm saying? And I think that sometimes we do that, and we have to, it takes a lot of work to be okay.
Yeah. You touched on something in terms of, did you feel like you had to hide your sexuality to your mother? Did you at one point?
I mean, I feel like I came out guns blazing. And I think that it's so interesting now, like, being a parent, because I really was like, if you knew me in my personal life, you knew there was, you know, you probably never saw me with a dude, but I could see how people out in the world would see me out with people and be like, oh, okay, got it. But I think that there was an element of, like, my mother wanted to protect me because, I mean, this is like the 90s, 2000s. It's like you're still a leper. Even now, like, I remember I dated someone not that long ago and it was like, oh, this is her friend. And I was like, we not friends. So I think that I know that I love my people specifically, but I'm also, like, a bit of an outlier to my people. And I think that it's also, I wonder, I've never really asked her, but, like, does she think that she got something wrong? You know what I'm saying? Like, I always wonder those things. But, like, now having children, yeah, I would be like, I would hope that you would want to be, I have daughters, I would hope that you want to be with a man. There are a lot of things.
It just feels easier.
It feels easier. It feels safer. People don't judge you. They don't look at you crazy. They don't think that, like, you know, I remember, like, when other people found out when I got older, this is an adult, I got kids, they'd be like, well, because I love the Lord with my whole heart. What do you think God has to say about you? And you're just like, I hope that he's like, brush your teeth more consistently. Like, I don't know.
Right. So
I think that there's so many things that, like, yeah, I could see why she didn't. Life is hard and people are mean. And I think the world can be so unkind that I think that we do so much to shield people from the world sometimes when they go out in it. And that can be misrepresented.
Now, as far as you would eventually, like, find your way into acting.
Yeah.
Was your mother part of that?
Yes. Well, yes and no. So I have two brothers, and my older brother went to school with this white kid who was an actor and was like, you should go on auditions. And my mom was like, okay, fine. And he did, like, this Bo Jackson commercial. God, I'm old. Bo Jackson. And so then my brother that's directly younger than me, we're 2 years apart, he started doing stuff. And mom was like, you should try it. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to like it. I don't think I'm going to be very good at it, but fine. And so I remember she was like, she set us down and she was like, here's the thing about it. I want you to be open to trying it because I want you to figure out what you love, and you do the thing that you love until you don't necessarily love it anymore. Okay. And so I went on like my first audition, and it was for Sesame Street, and we was playing on somebody's trampoline in their backyard, which sounds very suspect as an adult saying that out loud. But that was my first job. And I was like, cool, this doesn't seem that bad.
So the reason why I brought up mom, was it ever a strategy to going back to the sexuality to kind of keep that in the back? Being a Black actress, and that was kind of taboo, especially back then.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because I don't know, because it's so weird, because we've never like really talked about it. It was just like one day she was like, felt good about it. I don't know if that makes sense. But like, my mom has always very much been like, be who you are. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's something that like, because of the way it's told, and if you go to church or you whatever, it does seem like, you know, I'm the Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's a little odd. And so I don't know. We never had. See, I can't even say that was true, because like my mom was very present in anyone that I've dated. She's never been like, well, except from about 2 people, but like she knew. It was just, I don't think that she wanted the world to get the best of me now that I look back on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that she wanted people to, I think she wanted to protect me from that.
And you can kind of relate to that as if you were in her position.
Mm-hmm. Now I have kids, I'm like, yeah, no, I wouldn't want people are mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it now.
So it makes me like go into one of your biggest roles, which was the 2001, we would get a premiere of One-on-One.
Yeah.
On that show, you would play Spirit.
Yes.
Now, Spirit, she was boy crazy.
She was boy crazy. What a juxtaposition.
Were you
boy crazy or girl crazy?
Were you gay back then when you played? Wow.
I remember Cindy. We would ride the bus. She was this like Spanish girl. She was very Mexican because I grew up in LA. And I remember being like in the 3rd grade, being like, Cindy's the one. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I knew. I don't think people around me knew, because that's something that I think I'm very, in general in my life, I'm very social. But like my life is very private. So I never, even if I did bring people around, like you wouldn't know. I'm also not one of those people like hold me and I'm not that person. Okay. Like hold my hand, do this. So I don't think that like, even if that person was there, people
that's
wouldn't
just your
have
friend,
known. Yeah.
Your homegirl. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So you seem like you kept that from your cast members too.
Yeah. I don't think that anybody, no, it was like only my really close friends that knew that like this was my life. Yeah.
Yeah. How hard was that as an acting job? Were you at least a little bit attracted to men? Would you?
I mean, they look nice. It's not hard. I mean, I also think that like I've never, in all of the people that I dated as that character, I've never been like, ooh, I got to think that they're attractive to me in order for me to for this character to be attracted to them. I was really good at like separating who. It's weird because we act like, people be like, ooh, you act like Spirit. But yes, to some point. But I was really good at separating who this character was from who I was. Also because I'm very like, I'm an extroverted introvert, you know, like I'm very, and I like to be at home and all of these things. And I would always get so nervous in front of a live audience. Like I would, you know, like I knew that I could never do like reality TV or something like that. I say that and then watch like, shortly after this, I'd be like, I'm on reality TV. But like, I knew that there was a difference between how people felt about me and how people felt about the character. Yeah. And so it allowed me to be as interesting and be what that character needed, because good, bad, or indifferent, they weren't judging me. They were judging the character. So I was super intentional about like keeping those things separate, because me as a person, I'm like, always think that somebody's judging me. And, you know, are you okay? What do you need me to do? You want me to like, you know, pour you some water, whatever. So they lived in 2 separate parts of my brain.
Yeah. it makes me think, fast forward.
Yes,
There's a lot of gay rights, a lot of gay agendas in terms of like creating awareness for it. Do you regret not coming out back then in terms of career?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's a weird thing that, yes. I think that because it's important to see people be normal. Like, it's important to see people go to the grocery store and all of those things. I also think that, like, when we talk about progression of people, I can understand that I'm not white. Mm-hmm. And that's something very different. How people would look at that, how they would respect that, how they take that seriously. So it's like, yes, I think that it would have been nice, but I also think that, like, I was 15 when that show came out. Nobody would have taken that necessarily serious the way they take it today. They're like, she don't know what she wants. You know what I'm saying? She's just a tomboy or something, So I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of that, 15 years old, Dwayne Wade's daughter, Zaya Wade. Mm-hmm. There's a big conversation right now. Zaya was born as a young man who now identifies as a young woman. How do you take that to your mother when your children come to you and say, hey, mom, identify as this?
It's interesting because I have a younger daughter who prefers they, them pronouns. And I think that we're talking about apples and oranges, right? Because I am a woman who shows up in the world as a woman. And the only thing you may think the commonality is that because I like women, right? I don't know what it is to identify as something else than what I've shown up as. And I think that the thing that gets very complicated is specificity, right? Like, so I had to have that conversation with people in our family, and they're like, well, do you think that your, lesbian antics have but that's not the same thing because my daughter likes boys. You know what I'm saying? And she goes by she, her because she understands that that's easier for everyone. But they also, I'm like, I think that we don't give people enough room in one instance to be sure. And we also don't give people enough room to figure it out. I also think that I knew at a very young age that I didn't like bananas. You know what I'm saying? The actual fruit, not to be confused with something else. Or I knew that I loved cooking. I think that people can be sure about who they are at a young age. And it's about loving someone through a process. I also think that it's not for me to say what's right and wrong for anyone else. And I think that we've also gotten to a place where we speak so freely about other people's children.
Yeah.
That's not my child. And regardless of whatever I deem or don't deem valuable for someone, that's not my place. And also as a parent, I think that parenting is very hands-on and hands-off at the same time. I need to make sure that you feel cared for, you feel safe, you feel nurtured, you feel empowered. It's hard. How do I say that, as a parent, I want to empower you to make your own decisions. And then when you arrive at one, I'm like, yeah, but that one is wrong. You know what I'm saying? That's not how that works. It's you have to give people the space to figure themselves out. And I think when we see white kids having a meltdown in the grocery store, it's the worst thing that happens to them because it looks crazy. But it also teaches them to figure out what's wrong with them. The process is off, but what they need, what's wrong with them, how they're feeling in that moment. And that's why they'd be like, hey guys, I feel like I need a mental health day. You know what I'm saying? Because we don't get those opportunities to figure that out. We have to, and I really saw it in cooking. White people get a career and we get a job. And so it's those, but that's because they get to have a meltdown and somebody goes, hey, well, what are you feeling right now? And we don't get those privileges or we don't create those privileges, right? It is wild to me sometimes that I talk to my children and I'm like, Right. So you crying. Do you know why you're crying? Do you know, instead of just stop crying, you're going to be fine. Why are you not fine?
Yeah.
Because, and I tell this to like my older daughter, because you have to figure out why you're not fine and then be able to develop habits to make sure that you're fine. So you got to know what triggered you to feel the way that you feel in this moment. So you could go, because I realize I'll be like, you're sad, let's eat something. You know what I'm saying? Eating may not be the answer. Mm-hmm. It is for me. But like, what are the things that will make you feel okay, that will not spiral into unhealthy habits, right? Whatever unhealthy habits look like.
So it seems like, I think the word is grace. I feel like I'm hearing that more so, giving each other grace to explore, go through our process. I think the biggest senses that I'm hearing when it comes to that particular conversation is Zaya's too young to make certain decisions. I think people's concern is physically transforming oneself to another sex. It seems to be the really big pushback.
But like, is that an issue for them or is that an issue for you? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that an issue for you because you don't understand it? And I think that if we as a collective, as people, were like, it's an issue because I don't understand it, that's okay, right? Like, because we can have that conversation. Because it's not really about like, oh, this person is too young, because not that people marry people have, you allow people to have babies and your body physically transforms and you go through all these emotions and all of these things. So what's the thing about it? Let's get to like the root cause of the thing that's an issue for you. Because clearly it's not an issue for their family and their household. It's an issue for you on the other side of it. So what's the issue? And let's get to like why it's a problem. We may not agree when we like dissect that, but like at least you can figure that out and get it off your chest so we can move on. Because it's not about like, I don't know, I'm not going to say it's not because I don't want to speak for other people. I don't know that it's about, I think that saying someone is a child is a very easy answer to the thing that you don't agree with.
To right? Just shut it down.
Yeah, like, oh, that's a kid. No. Like, because when it's an adult doing it, you don't say as much because it's like, well, that's an adult. So it's like, well, what's the issue here, right? Like, because some people will be like, oh, mentally, you don't know what happens. But if, like, they can afford a doctor. They can afford the steps that happen through that process to make that someone's cared for. So what is the real thing that, like, yucks your yum about all of this? Because that's not your kid.
I think it's more so, you know, on our platform, we have a lot of conversations about representation. And we can, maybe this could be an opportunity for us to process this and dissect this. And I'm trying to articulate this as best as I can. But it does seem that there could be an agenda at times pushed onto the heterosexual community.
What's that agenda?
It feels more so of accept, even if you may not be as open to it. And I think you get a level of pushback.
Right.
So
this is the question I always pose, right? Because I was having this conversation with someone who was Black and that is also very queer. And we looked at this very different. They'd be like, how do you identify? And I'm like, as a Black person, because it doesn't matter who I'm dating or anything like that. If somebody opted into shooting me in the street, it wouldn't be because I like ladies. It would be because I'm Black, first circle. And so I'm like, so I see myself as Black before anything, where I can understand that other people may not. But it always fascinates me when I hear this conversation because you sound like a white person.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because with the same people, Black, we will be like, well, we just want to be accepted. We just want you to see value in us. And so it's always interesting to me in any gamut of how people deem anyone who's not a white man that we have these conversations, because then if there is the gay agenda, then there's the Black agenda. You know what I'm saying? Like we all, and yes, we all have an agenda. We all desire to show up in the world. Like I have a cooking agenda. You know what I'm saying? You have a comedy agenda. We ought to say that no one has an agenda is also very wild to me. And I think that fascinates me as a people who have been constantly, so there's two things that work here. I'm going to say this, but I'm also going to totally counter what I'm saying. It's always interesting to me that we have a desire for equality, but don't consider our own people equal. But we also have to understand that with married to a woman raising 2 children, am not running the same race as the white man who's standing on the soapbox that's married to his husband raising their obviously not white children. You know what I'm saying? Like those two things are
so
not.
So there's racism in
it's the same ecosystem, and I think that people will be like, oh yeah, well it's not the same. I don't like, you know what I'm saying? Like white women will sit here and complain about abortion rights and still vote for Trump because their desire is not to align with people who are not white. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like it's the same thing. And I think that we get so caught up in other things, or it's interesting that we get caught up in the inability to not understand other people while having the deep desire to have a race of people understand us.
It's definitely a sticky one. And I'm trying to, because I like kind of going into places that people may be afraid to touch. And I had debates before, kind of like within my own personal space of like trying to articulate what heterosexuals feel. It sounds even weird saying like, oh, the heterosexuals are under attack. Not under attack.
But that's the same way white people be like, our whiteness is under, you know what I'm saying? Because it's the thing of, it's very interesting.
But it's somewhat tied into blackness as well. Because, you know, growing up in the church, it's...
Yeah, I know.
Homosexuality.
I have a friend now that's like, I love you, but it's big chance you going to hell. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, thanks.
Does that hurt you when you hear stuff like that?
I think that maybe in the beginning it stung because it has nothing to do with how the Lord sees me, but how you see me. And it's really interesting, the shift change, because if you didn't know, I was fine, because nothing changed with me, but except your access to information. And so it's like now, like what I still raise the same kids. We still do the same things. We still serve in church together. We still do. The only thing is you have a deeper understanding of who I am personally. And that's the thing that changed for you. And so I think that I pick up my own cross and walk. Yeah. And so how that's for me to work out. And I also find just how people see that really interesting. But I also can understand how you see it, and that's fine too. Yeah, it's quite interesting. You brought up the white perspective, because it does kind of sound like some white talking points. Hey, we're here to preserve certain things. I think for us, because it does feel like we're being attacked and we don't know who to trust. And a lot of times the things that are being marketed to us aren't really coming from directly us. Like, it might represent you. They might put you on the poster, but who's behind it? So you just don't know who to trust. And I think there's just conversations happening of, is this about me accepting? Because I accept you. But when you put it in my face constantly, okay, what's going on here? I think that's where people... Yeah, and I think that's wild, because we haven't known each other very long, but we've talked pretty consistently. And I've at least I don't think I may have pushed having children and going to school agenda on you, but I don't think that...
Well, it doesn't come from you.
Right.
It comes from like corporations.
Yeah, which TV. Is like, okay, Black History Month. You know what I'm saying?
No,
we've overloaded people with like really weird information, because corporations and white people trade in the thing that they deem equitable, right? Like Latin American Month, Black History Month, Indigenous people. We like Christopher Columbus. No, we don't. We want the gay people. Just kidding. We want abortion rights.
Whatever's the thing
keep
right
your baby.
now.
So it's like that, but I see how people get caught up in the spinning of it all. And I think that we, as people in the quest for access to information and figuring out your rights and learning who you are, we've lost humanity a little bit along the way, because like I actually really don't care who you marry and who you go home to.
Right.
As long as you're not next door to me chopping up bodies, we fine. And that's what you should really be caring about. You know, do I eat people in my spare time? No. So I think that we also get caught up in things that really logistically have nothing to do with how you show up in the world, and then also how you interact with me. You know what I'm saying? But I think it comes from when white people are in a space and they don't feel validated, their quest for validation. And I think that it's really fascinating because I think that we, as other people, adopt those tropes. We start to take on and be like, and you're just like, ain't nobody worried about.
Have you ever heard of somewhat of a rumor of, or conspiracy?
Okay.
The population control. Conspiracy tied into...
Yes, and that I do think that... I think I'm always very fascinated with like white people in general.
Right.
And they've done such a diligent job.
Yes.
So I think that that's all of these things that we sense and we feel. And I think that like even being married to a woman is weird because I'm married to a woman and I don't even fool with some of these things that these white gays be talking about. But I can understand like all of it is at the end of the day, bottom line, all of this is about preserving whiteness in its own fashion, right? Like whether I'm the very successful white person, whether I'm the minority, like it was really, I'm not going to tell somebody else, but white people have a desire to always be centered. And I think that we have to kind of be like, is this a white thing or is this a us thing?
Right.
In that.
I think that's what's been going on. Like you're genuinely saying, hey, I'm living my life and I'm being who I am. And then there's someone behind you that may weaponize who you are and they can see another outcome if we push it through. So I think there's two things possibly happening. Yeah.
And I respect it. Like I remember that my older daughter had a friend who considered liking girls because I don't know where this kid is. But my daughter does not. But they wanted to hang out and they wanted to have a sleepover. But I know that her mother is very vocal about that's not a lifestyle I want you around. So I'd be like, you can't come to my house. Not because I'm so offended that like somebody doesn't deem me valuable, because I don't care how. I have to value me first. If you don't, that's fine. There's a lot of people that don't value me. Like, let's, get in line. But it's not about that. It's about the fact that I honor as a parent what your parent is, right, wrong, and different, however I see it. It's my responsibility to be like, that's how they see you. That's how they want to parent you. That's how your world shows up. And I think that we take a lot of things personal. And like your views and your religion and your belief and how you show up in the world is fine. I also love Jesus. Am I going to go sit in the church and they be like, say, no, I believe in the New King James Version, but I also can understand that this was a white man who had slaves and wore dresses. So I think that we don't let people live enough in their own way of figuring it out that like is wild to me, because we're also at the same time asking.
Yeah, I can imagine you probably have like, your story or your stance or who you are is quite unique because you at one point was married to a man.
Yeah. And
then also you do have children. Yeah. Being a Black woman, there's a lot of perspectives that you have. What makes you gravitate towards certain things that you deem as true? Is it an instinct? Is it a...
I find everything fascinating. I find people completely fascinating. The ones I agree with, the ones I don't, But I also understand that, like, there's always work to be done. And whatever that means. You know what I'm saying? Like, whether it's me as a parent, me as a partner, me and my faith, how I show up when it comes to food, how I show up for my people. It's also... I'm very hyper specific. I'm talking about Black people, not that, whatever. And I think that there's always like now, like I, grew up in church. My uncle's a pastor. He weird. But like, then I was married and in church. I served very heavy in Caucasian church. And that I think really took me down a very fascinating rabbit hole because I think I saw American history very different when I started going to white church as an adult.
Okay.
Because I love our Jesus. First of all, we all cliffhanger. Jesus ain't white. We know it. On the map, geographically, you know what I'm saying? But like, I grew up knowing if you never do anything else, you've already done enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And it was really interesting to be in a place with white people that's like, he made the universe. Why wouldn't he give me everything?
Mm-hmm.
And so it really started making me challenge, one, how I see my faith, how I position myself, what I ask for, what I go after, how I teach my children faith and how to show up in the world, and then how I see people. Because that's crazy to me. That like, it was like, I find American history so fascinating, and like the idea that like white people think that they showed up somewhere and have the right to it because that's what they believe. But it is what they believe. So like, how do we not serve the same faith? You know, white people believe that there's no dark place that God can't cover. Like there's nowhere I can't step outside of his grace if I really love him and I know that he cares about me. And we don't look at that way. So it has allowed me to look at people with a lot, not all white people, but it allows me to look at people with a lot of like, yeah, this is nuts, but I can understand why you crazy. So I get it. It's okay. It has allowed me to give people a lot of room to get it wrong and fail, and forgive them for getting it wrong sometimes too.
Would you agree that there's a double standard when it comes to a woman homosexual, women that are homosexual versus men that are homosexual in terms of treatment and perception?
I mean, I don't know, because that wasn't what made me self-aware. You know what I'm saying? It was being in a relationship and completely losing who I was. I look at myself now and miss the person that I was so much. And I know that I'll never get that person back. And I lost so much of who I was that like, I have to be 10 toes down in every area of my life about who I am and minding the gap for other people, because it was people who I barely knew, who I didn't know, who allowed me to come back to me. Awesome. And I think that it is my reasonable service to care for people, whether it's in the workplace or, you know, passing in the street or whatever, because I know what it is to lose yourself.
So that would be fair to say you knew that you were gay while you were in your marriage to a man?
So here's the thing. I knew that, and I was very honest with him about that. Well, no, he say that now. But like, I was honest about this. You met my exes, and even if you tag everybody I dated, you like, it's a similarity here, and it ain't me. Which one of these things does not belong? But I think I had gotten to the place where, and it was the first thing that made me lose me, where I was like, oh, if I really want to love Jesus and live right, I have to do this particular thing. I have to, you know, not wear pants as much. I have to do this and all of these things. And then it was like chipping away very slowly at who I was, which is weird because I played a character on TV that people celebrated for not doing that. And I didn't know how to do it in my own life, but I chipped away until I was the thing that everybody needed me to be, and the thing that everyone said that the Lord would be so pleased with. But I was so miserable and everything was falling apart in my life. So I was like, well, Lord, if I'm doing all of the things, and I mean, it's scripture, right? Like I'm doing all of the things, like I'm logistically doing all of the things. Why is this so upside down? But I wasn't living to live. I was living to make sure other people felt comfortable. And people are fickle. Sometimes we hungry and we tired and we angry. And so it was like I started to base who I was on fickle things instead of being rooted in the things that mattered, my word, who I was, being consistent, caring for people.
One of my favorite movies was How Stella Got Her Groove Back. I think just being a young man, the fantasy of pulling this older woman was like, was a thing. Yeah, how was that? How did you even land a role in that movie with Angela Bassett, Taye Diggs, and Whoopi Goldberg?
I don't remember how I got that job, but I remember I don't remember auditioning for it. Okay, so here's the thing. I think that like I never thought that I was good at acting.
Wow.
I've always been a person who's been defined by their works, whether it was on the workplace or like in my life. I've always been brought up. You have to work for all of these things and whatever. So I've never thought that I was actually good at anything, really. And so I think that thing felt very larger than life out of all the things that I think I did, because there were so many great people in my space. And I always felt like I could never be this incredible. But it was like I was 10, 12. And we went to Jamaica. We got to stay for like, 2.5 months. And just, I remember like shooting in Pasadena and being around that scene where it's like the cookout scene and sitting there and just, it was so incredible to be around people who were so talented, but also was like, I'll never be this. So it's really interesting, like looking back on how magical it was, but also like the imposter syndrome and the performance anxiety of it all. But it was the most amazing thing. It was, I'm so grateful for the career that I had, because I've always been around us, and I've always been around us who have cared for us very well. And that was like amazing.
As far as you gotten older with your relationships or current marriage, did you kind of start seeing did you ever see yourself trying to date younger at one point?
Younger? No, definitely not.
Kind of like, the character Stella, or you just...
No. I mean, like, I remember being divorced, and like, I always felt like there's nothing a young person could do for me but babysit my kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. No.
I find it... you just mentioned the divorce. I just find it so... Your husband knew that you liked women, or... How did your husband view you?
It was really interesting, because being married, I'm never one of those people that like... I don't get in a lot of relationships, but also like when I'm in that, I'm not like, ooh, that person's pretty, like that.
But you guys had to have a conversation.
Yeah, but I was very committed to being married, and I was very committed to my husband. And I felt like there was a point where I felt like this is the thing that I should be doing. You know what I'm saying? So I never looked at anything then, because this is what I should be doing. Yeah. And because I'm a person who's defined by their works, I'm going to commit to this thing. Committed to that. 110% and not look to the left or the right, because this is what I need to be doing. I think that I'm going to speak for both of us, and, he probably hates me. When you start to get older and you get into a relationship, people deserve to be happy. Not saying that like I was thinking about someone else, but I think that marriage is forever, but it needs to be forever with the right person. Right. Whatever those things are for you. And I think that the life that he desired and the life that I desired, and that's not like whether it's with a man or a woman, but I'm talking about being able to commit to someone and raise children and buy a home and like all of those things. I don't think we weren't the people for each other. And that's okay. And I think that it's okay to be like, I tried my best and I got it wrong. Yeah, I think we sometimes but it's also the privilege of failure. White folks can fail. You know what I'm saying? Like when you look at someone who's an entrepreneur and they have like a startup that's successful, they'll be saying, I failed 3, 4, 5 times at things and I got it right. And had it not been for those failures, I wouldn't have arrived here. We don't even have the ability to fail at things and position it as a success. Yeah. So it was like, we're going to be miserable together. Or, like that thing. But it was okay that we made the wrong choice.
It seemed like he was, he's not here to speak for himself, but it does seem like he was committed to you.
Now, don't jump the gun, because that's also not true.
That's not true?
I don't know.
Well, I was just thinking about...
that's the full scope of that story.
I guess what I'm saying, because as a heterosexual man, right? If I'm with a woman who maybe I know instinctively she would want to be with a woman,
Okay.
I would kind of like, that means I'm really more so committing to them as a person. I accept you for who you are, and I'm locking on that.
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out how did it make sense? How did the equation make sense for him?
Well, those are things that I will probably never talk about outside. Okay. But I think that I can see how, well, I mean,
because you're a great person, so I'm just saying.
There's a lot of girls in the world that kiss girls, and people men find that attractive.
Kissing
you know what
girls,
I'm saying?
Kissing girls versus like, hey, I might want to be.
Well, I was never like, hey, you see that one over there? I took her down. Like, that was not my conversation with him either. But I mean, I think that we were very young, and I think that we were committed to the thing we thought we should have been committed to.
Got you.
Yeah.
Now, following How Sailor Got a Groove Back, you would land the role as Spirit Jones on 1-on-1.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you landed that particular role?
Yes, I do very clearly, that one. We all had the same agent, me, Kyla, Robert. And Kyla and I were friends. So her mom called my mom. Mm-hmm. I had actually stopped acting because I like school. So I had stopped and I was getting ready to start high school. And Kyla's mom called my mom and she was like, hey, Kyla got a show.
Wow.
And they need her to have a friend. So we're asking all of Kyla's friends that were in the industry to audition for the show so they can have a sense of like a real chemistry. Mm-hmm. And so had my mom not gotten that phone call, I would have never auditioned for that show. I would be somewhere in somebody's school doing something else. So that was the only reason that I started acting again. Because literally after the show was done, I did one or two things and I was like, okay, I'm going back to school. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was that. And so as a very weird, nerdy girl with different colored braids, walked into that audition and auditioned for about 2 months. Mm. And then we would have auditions together.
Was 2 months typical back then?
Not always. But I think that they really wanted to get that right. I think that it was important for them to find the right people and really have the opportunity of time. I mean, they really made sure that we also understood the process of what was happening. They would give us feedback on our auditions and all these things. They really made sure that us as characters and us, when it came to chemistry, we really understood the depth of that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it was like 2 months. It started in August, a little bit before August. And we auditioned and then it was like, okay, yeah, it's time to go to work, which was cool because we really went in there with a relationship.
Right.
Even the five of us, yes, we cared about each other. We cared about life. People were growing up and having babies and starting families and, moving out. It was so much that happened in that time that we were all invested in each other's lives.
Yeah. Do you remember any guest stars or celebrity guests that was like a favorite of yours or a favorite memory?
I mean, we had so many people. I think there was like one. I remember one time we had Method Man on the show, and then we had Common, and then there was one episode where it was like Flowetry. Yo, that was probably the biggest one because it was like Eve, Flowetry, Angie Stone, and we still had voicemails. Mm-hmm. So it was like Flowetry. My mom was like, "Can y'all like sing and leave a voicemail?" Wow. On my voicemail. So it's weird to look at it now because never would I thought that 50 million years later, it would be the thing that would still live on. I don't think that like in that moment, it was the desire to do something really, really well. Mm-hmm. I never would have thought that like one day I'll have children who will watch these episodes over and over again, or their friends will watch them. Mm-hmm. And it will be the thing that like young girls will come up to me and be like, yo, like, that's me. I get to be me.
So who is Spirit Jones?
Yeah.
If you can define.
I think that was interesting because she's a real person. Like outside of the show, all of these characters were real people.
Right. I think Flex said that.
Yeah.
This was his
all creation. Real. They're all actual people. So it's always so interesting when people say that because I'm like her name is Spirit Jones. She's a real curly haired, very interesting person. But I think that not about the person, but the thing that Spirit, like much like her name, but she represented a lot of freedom. I think that she also represented like we as Black girls can be all the things. We can do our own hair. We can make our own clothes. We could be a really loyal friend and be like, girl, this ain't that. I think it was the show had a way of really speaking to the core of who people were and affirming that thing on the inside of you that goes like, we deem you valuable, which is the thing is us as people desire so much. And I think that it spoke to that. It spoke to relationships. It spoke to friendships, you know, because it also was like you had a dad. Men care. They care. Yeah. They comb hair. They do all the things. It allowed you to see what dating looks like for adults. It allowed you to see two men who are friends just trying to figure it out. And I think that's a big thing about that show. These were just people just trying to figure it out.
You know, on our platform, we've talked to several different talents in the industry. Some who've kind of had like major roles and then kind of decided to transition on or whatever else follows. Do you think this role typecasted you? And to kind of extend it, did people think in real life that you were into the hotepery of it all, into rocks? And
I don't think that it typecast me, but I do understand that I'm very peculiar. When you meet me, you know, out in the world, I know that I say weird things by nature. I think that I think it was a space that allowed people to, when they tap into it, to be who they are. I think that we all want to be understood. And this was a character that had people did really well at allowing people to feel like they were understood. And it was a privilege for me because the character also was like, oh yeah, this is not the thing that I need to be doing. I knew at a very early age that I needed to be cooking. I knew what that was for me. I also knew what that meant for my family. I knew that like I come from a family of 7 generations of cooks. My great, like 7 times great grandfather was a slave on a plantation. He was their cook. This is something that I feel very strongly about. And that character also, with the words my mom said, you do the thing that you love, allowed me to be like, oh, this ain't where I need to be. This is where I need to be serving people in the way that I find valuable, but also how I can care for people the most.
Now, you would do 4 seasons?
Yeah, I did 4.
Some people will want to know, why did you end up leaving that show?
I got fired. The rest of us who didn't, we all did. But I think that I think that what was happening, you know, like that was the season of television where we showed up. And in anything, people are in cycles, right? Like Black people, families, Spanish people, like people are in cycles in the industry. And I think in the direction that they were trying to go, they needed to create something where this is also the time when UPN was no longer UPN and it was merging with the CW. So it's like, how do we marry these audiences? And I think that was their best effort at like holding on to what Black people needed, but also understanding that like white people are over here watching TV and Dawson's Creek and all of these other things. So let's merge, make a shift that could speak to everyone.
Yeah, and that's kind of how they repositioned the show to reflect. You had some white characters now into the storyline. How did that immediately impact you?
It allowed me, because I'm also one of those people that like, I like to learn the hard way. Like, I knew that wasn't the career that I wanted or needed, but as long as it served me in that way, as long as it kept showing up for me, I would have stayed. I knew that I needed to go. I knew that like I wanted to be cooking. So it was almost like it released me of a thing to go be like, oh, have the career that you want to have.
So it kind of pushed you in the right direction. So after that role, did you seek other roles or was it immediate?
I was cooking while I was on One-on-One.
Okay.
In the way that like, you know, I was cooking for other people, but also at the same time, like any opportunity that I had, I would like, oh, it's Christmas. I'm going to make everybody something for Christmas. Like, I used to Christmas time make caramel cakes, and it would be like 200 and package them and like all of the things. It was like my jam. And so my mom had gotten sick, so I had slowed down on life in general to make sure that she, to be around. But then I started cooking and I went to culinary school, and I've never like looked back. People always be like, do you think that and logistically it just never made sense with my life. I was working in restaurants, so it just was like, I don't even see the time.
Now, the 5th season would come up of One-on-One with this new flavor, and it would see a 6th season.
Yeah.
Was there any pettiness of you be like,
No, but it's also misguided, right? Because I think that people can be short-sighted about what people need, right? Like, because they don't see it, whether it's any non-white show, they've always pulled it before it hit its sweet spot. And so I think that the changes that they made were not the thing that got them to their place. But I wouldn't expect white people to understand how loyal we are. Frankie and Beverly and Maze came out with one album, and we still will wear white linen and black sandals and go to a concert in two-step. We are very loyal and consistent people. And I don't think that sometimes white folks know enough about us to understand that about us.
So in hindsight, do you think if they didn't make the changes, you guys probably would have seen several more seasons?
Yeah. Because these people were actually growing up with people. You know what I'm saying? Like, they actually wanted to see where they were going to college and people were invested in these people's journeys. So I think that, whether or not I would have been there, still up for grabs. But like, I think that people would have cared. Yeah.
Star of the show, Flex Alexander, he would give us something that also made that show special, was a father and daughter relationship, particularly a black man and a black young lady, that made it special. Now, fast forward, in his own life, he would get sidetracked with the industry of Hollywood. I would assume that role was probably one of his most talked about roles. He would find himself homeless. He's talked about this publicly, so I'm not putting this like on blast, but how did you kind of look at that from afar when you probably had left by that point?
Yeah. I had no idea that this was happening until everybody else knew. I think that sometimes people make people on television or entertainers very much larger than life and don't understand that like this too is a business. If you lost your job and couldn't get another job, it'd be hard for you. And I think that people like miss that part of things.
It's that. I think it's just disheartening, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's, and I mean, like
would that happen to, who was the Full House dad?
I think, so it's, I mean, and it's also like, there's a lot of expenses and things happening that like people don't understand the business of television and how it's like there and it's also not there.
Yeah.
Which is complicated. And like, I think that sometimes as a person who was in it and no longer in it, right? Like, I think that it's hard to speak to the reality of certain things because it makes it less magical, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's always that thing of like, ooh, it's bright lights, the big city. And it's like, no, it's a lot of no's. It's a lot of struggle. It's a lot of waitresses and waiters out here. And I think that also doesn't allow, humanizing it doesn't make it the magic of television or the magic of a thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's hard and unfortunate. And I also think it's the thing that, whether it's financially or other things, doesn't give people the opportunity to be honest about the struggle until they're on the other side of their struggle. Because it's like, I made it through, guys. Ta-ha. And it's like, but people struggle. Like, people have been in this business, whether it's financially, mentally, and had a very hard time.
Yeah.
And I think it also does young people today a disservice, because this is anything you do takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of grit and a lot of, this is not going to work out, but I'm going to stay the course. And when we're not honest about, like, the only thing we can quantify is like school, right? But like everything else, it looks like you showed up today skinny. And it's like, that's also not real. Like, it's weird to be a parent now and be like, that's not real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you know that while I was acting, you have to have a certain GPA and I'm going to school. So when it takes you 8 hours to go to school, I got to do everything that you do in 8 and 3.
Mm-hmm. What I was pointing out at just now, I mentioned Full House, and I'm kind of looking at things from a Black lens. Uncle Jesse, I think Flex in terms of spirit was kind of like that cool dad, uncle. And it's like, okay, you have this Black man who clearly is talented, but the industry that he's in maybe didn't do a good service towards him, whether it was his own decisions, but it's unfortunate to see one of ours who is like an Uncle Jesse be even put in that position. So it's the relationship of Black talent in Hollywood, and it seems to be a trend, at least from what we do on our platform and kind of document, that they kind of will use y'all.
That's the cycle of people, right? Like that's the cycle of, as much as we're not going to say we, but as much as people will joke about Tyler Perry has held on to people very well, has held on to a thing for being our community. It's always going to be Black. Whereas like other spaces will cycle that. Like we entertainment is latching onto the thing that like people deem valuable and quantifiable in that moment. And sometimes it's not us. Whether or not that's true or not is not the conversation. It's about like, oh, this is the thing that people watch. These are commercials that they watch during this thing. You know, like all of that. And I think that that's also a part of the business that I was like, these are games that I can't play. Like I'm not built for that. Like I'm not built for, like I know that I'm not built for that whole logistical part of the business. I'm not good at it. I know that
it's being fake.
I don't think it's that. I think that I'm not good in life at being strategic.
Got you. Well, that will your team would come into play to protect you.
But I'm not, you know what I'm saying? And so I think that like, that's where also I struggle is like, I'm not good at executing being strategic. And I think that in anything that you do, you have to decide whether or not you're going to be strategic. Like even in my food businesses, I have to decide, do I pay people a living wage or do I cut costs? And so who are you and are you okay with that? And I think that I am a person who's not built for it.
Yeah. And this is great to kind of get to the tail end of the conversation. We had an interview with Dougie Doug. He was like super popular in the 90s, and we had a great conversation with him. And he ultimately, would experience some great success in the business and then decide to transition out of the business. So I think it's always fascinating to talk to individuals like yourself who could probably easily step back in some capacity and start working again and try things out, but did not go there. So outside of just like your culinary business and going with that part of your spirit, what about the business that made you say, I need to leave? I need to step away from Hollywood?
I mean, apart from feeling like I was never good at it, if we're really being honest, I've never felt like I was good at it. I never, I think that you had to be certain things. You had to be the McDonald's commercial. You had to look, and I'm like, I don't really work as some of those things.
Like colorism, is that what you're hinting
like
at?
I didn't. And then I think like when I had children, people would be like, you should come back. And I was like, I don't know that I have the time to just go on auditions. And that's different if that's your passion. That's the deep burning desire on the inside. That wasn't my passion. I just felt like there's so much more I could be doing with my time. When I left, it was a shift of the work in famous. I have no desire to be famous. I have a desire to do something really well. I also know that like after I had children, it was like, okay, so you're either gonna have to lose weight or gain weight. And I was like, the idea of whether or not I should lose weight or gain weight is wild. Like if I'm gonna lose weight, let me lose weight for whatever that reason is, but not because hopefully I'll get a job or gain weight because then I'll be the large friend that makes that. I was just like, I can't think this hard about something that like is all what ifs.
Right. And it really impacts your life.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of like the passion part of it. Because when you're passionate, rejection can be somewhat an obstacle that you can hurdle over. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, it could be definitely like something that can
in the corner crying. You struggling. Yeah.
So it does seem like you found your passion when it comes to culinary. Because I think you would hit a hurdle, at least that we know of. You had a restaurant and it closed.
Yes. And that's like, I think aside from race, when I entered into this business, I was very fortunate to have people take me under their wing and be like, do the thing that you do very specifically. But also that wasn't a stretch for me because I came from a career where I did the thing that I did very specifically. I showed up for Black people very specifically. So that's been always who I am. I've never had to code switch. I've never worked at a job where, no, that is not how you spell my name. You know what I'm saying? Like I've never had to do that. So that mindset is very foreign to me because I've never had to live that. So when I continued to build my career, I always was like, I'm cooking for us, like whatever I do. And so when we opened the restaurant that was in Berkeley, we were like, cool, we're going to tell our food story. Me and my, we're going to tell, niggas was out here slaves, now we not, and we, make food. And then we realized that like, this was a space where people came even if they weren't hungry, that they could feel safe. So what does that look like? How do we show up for people? And if we're creating a space for people to feel safe that are not white, we need to make sure they're fed. So that means we, have to buy halal food and make sure that we're feeding people in a way that they feel cared for. And so then when I left and went to New York, the thing that I hated being a single mom was like, I would walk into a job and I'd be like, hey, this is the schedule that I need. Because I understood like my privilege of not needing a job for a long time, and be like, this is the schedule that I need because my kids are in school. And they'd be like, we'll figure it out. We'll see what we can do. And then a white woman would walk in and be like, hey, I need the schedule. And they'd be like, oh my God, you're so strong. Let's make this happen. So when I moved
to being
a
Black single mom.
Yeah. And so it was like, when I moved to New York, my contractor was Black. The guy who did all our artwork was Black. I only really hired Black people to the point where white people would walk in there and be like, I know who E40 is. And I'm like, that's cool, but whatever. And we had the tough conversations about like, what wine do we put in our restaurant? Only Black people. Well, there's not that many. Well, why is there not that many? So when people come in here and ask us what we don't have, we have to say, because there's not that many of us because we don't have access to land. And I would have the conversations when hiring people and be like, look, yes, obviously I need a job, but you need I need you more than you need me. Leverage it. And I remember at the same time, like being in church and somebody being like, yo, what if you were the platform for other people to stand on? How would you show up? And I felt very like, that's the fucking dumbest thing. But then it convicted me and I was like, you know what? What if? So I was like, okay, yeah. So I'm going to teach you everything you need to know because I know what it's like to walk into a restaurant and somebody say to you, did your ancestors teach you how to mop? You know what I'm saying? So I was like, cool. Well, we're going to hire Black people. We're going to give them all the access. We had 2 months of training about wine. And then I paid them more than a living wage. Half of them got a salary. And I low-key turned our basement into a daycare because I think it's disrespectful for people to have to take the majority of their pay to pay childcare so they can just go to work. And I think that those things, because I didn't center white people, they were like, we can't do this anymore. And I was like, that's fine. Because if I'm not doing this, then I'm really not doing what I need to be doing. I'm really not, because I can care for people, you know what I'm saying, when they show up in this restaurant. When they ask me, why is the fried chicken off the bone? Because why would I make you pay for the bone? I'm going to give you the chicken that you paid for. That's the easy part. But it's making sure that, like, my dishwasher and the nigga who mops the floors feels valuable. Because if the floors aren't clean, you can't walk in here. And if we ain't got no dishes to serve these people, none of us need to be in here. And I was okay with that because I'm not going to sit here and serve you my culture and compromise my people at the same time.
This is more so conversations with your partners?
I was the chef, like, operator that was brought on. And it was kooky because the whole thing was like, we want to help minorities. But I was like, no, that's okay. I don't need it. I don't need to be here.
What joys do you get out of that? Because some people can look at cooking like a task.
Oh, and those are my favorite people. Because throughout my career, like, I taught. And so now it's weird. It's weird to be in a space because I remember my whole life, and it is the answer to your question, but it's not. Like, I felt like when I left acting, there was a bit of me that felt like I failed because I am defined by my works. I squandered time. So it's weird to be in a place now, like, doing these kinds of things or, doing Pinterest where I'm like, hey, let's make a cooking show and all these things. But I find people fascinating. And I think that cooking is a lot like life. And people hate the shit that's not sexy. The stuff that lays the foundation and the tracks for who you are. So the people that hate cooking are my favorite people because I can speak to the thing in you that goes, you can absolutely do it. Anybody can cook. It's just you don't like dishes and you don't like feeling lost. So let's put you in a situation where you don't have that many dishes and you don't feel lost. And so that's the thing that, like, I love the most. And I think it's the moment when you smell it or you taste it and you're like, oh shit, I did that. And I'm like, you did. Right. I didn't do anything. You did all of this on your own. And you should be celebrated for that in this moment because those small victories are the things that, like, keep us going. We're like, nigga, I fucking made a steak or I grilled some chicken. You know what I'm saying? Like, I did that. And so that is the thing that makes me go, this is all worth it.
Chef SicilySewell.com.
Yes.
This is where people are able to get their classes. And
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a mouthful. Somebody had already bought the other websites. But yeah, like, I teach a lot. Normally, I teach people how to make a sandwich.
Really?
Yeah, because everybody's had a sandwich. You'd be like, oh, fuck it, I can make a sandwich. It's a lot when we get in there. Logistically, it's a little complicated.
I'm going to throw this out here. I feel like I know where your position is, but there's always this debate about male, female roles. There's debates sometimes with men dating women who don't like to cook. As a woman, as a chef, do you have any stance on that? But do you have any stance on that?
Do I think that you should date someone who cooks? Or they should know how to cook?
Yeah. I guess from a point of view of, as a man, would it be good that a man should have a woman that knows how to cook?
Can you change my oil? Are you good at it? And do I know that the oil is full when you're done? Because if not, if my skill set is knowing the best Chinese restaurant around the corner on speed dial, you're still fed. I don't think we have skill sets and talents. That may not be yours. You need eggs. Eggs are actually very hard. I don't know why people lead with eggs. But, like, no, I don't cook in my house. Well, I do, but my children cook. So, no, I don't think so. I don't know that should define what makes someone qualified. Because I could date you and you may not ever cook as good as I can cook. Does that mean I don't eat your food or I swallow it and smile and be like, that was trash, but you tried? I think if that's something that's important to you, you should find someone that's important to. Or the person who's so incredible that makes it a deal breaker. That doesn't matter.
So in line, yeah.
No, sometimes you shouldn't eat everybody's food.
Man, this has been definitely one of our lengthier conversations, full of different perspectives. I will hit us with a closing question for you. When you look back on this current journey that you're on, what would you tell to people that are struggling with finding their true purpose or their true passion?
To keep going and keep assessing where you are and asking questions and being open to opportunities of learning. It's okay to fail. Failing is one of your best attributes. Don't hold fast to what you think success could look like, because it could be somewhere that you never seek it, that you find it. And give it time. Anything takes time. And don't discredit your time. Consistency is very hard. It takes a lot of mental bandwidth. And I think that if in the moment, 40% is your best, you gave 100 of what you had to give in that time. And that's okay. And it's okay to take naps and eat a lot of bread in the process.
Well, Sicily, thank you for your first one-on-one with Hype Plus.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing you a lot more. Keep us posted on whatever you have going on.